Hi everyone. In this lecture, I'm going to be leading you in what I like to call a Ctrl+F workshop. Now, when I say Ctrl+F, if you're not familiar with that terminology, it is the keyboard shortcut for how you can find a particular piece of text in a document or on a website. And this will guide you through a handful of things that you can search for in your own written work to help you more effectively edit your essays prior to submission. Now, when I say editing, I'm being really specific because there are various levels of revision when we think about taking academic writing from the rough draft stage to the final draft stage, and editing should be the last thing you do. Editing falls under what I would call lower order concerns when it comes to writing, not because it's not important, but because in comparison to the higher order concerns, which are more related to content, which would be the effectiveness of your thesis statement, how well you've developed your ideas, the way that your overall essay organization is functioning, and how reader-centered it is, all of those things are, I would say, by and large, a lot higher impact than the things that this lecture will go over. That doesn't mean that they're not important. Paying close attention to things like syntax and proofreading and word choice, all of those things are important when it comes to making sure that your essay is polished prior to submission. But when in doubt and when under time constraints, you really want to direct your attention to higher order concerns before you get to this point where you're editing. That being said, this particular workshop is all about editing. So the first term that you can search for in your essay is the word it. And in your word processor, whatever type of word processor you're using, you should search for IT. That sounds really obvious, right? But what you'll need to do is to surround the word it with two spaces. So as you sort of input it into your keyboard, you're going to click spacebar, IT spacebar. The reason you want to do this is so that the computer will do exactly what you tell it to. And so if you ask it to search every instance of the letter I and the letter T together, you're going to get a lot. You're going to get every single instance of those letter combinations in the middle of words. And so by offsetting the word it by spaces, you will find exactly what you're looking for. So once you've found all of the instances of it in your paper, you want to make sure that you're using them correctly. If you find that you are starting sentences with the word it, you should rephrase the sentence so that the subject of the sentence is clear. I want you to make sure that you're double checking that if you're using it as a pronoun, that you're looking for the antecedent to those pronouns, right? The word to which it refers in your sentences so that you're being nice and clear. Whenever possible, you really don't need the word it. Let me give you a couple of examples so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So this is, in green, you can see this is the original sentence that I'm working with, and the two in orange are the revisions. It was a humid morning when I got the call that changed my life. You can see that the word it in that sentence that starts it out, it's not really doing anything because the actual subject of the sentence, the thing I'm actually talking about, is either the morning or the phone call. And while I know not everybody is as big a grammar nerd as I am, I do think that if you read either of the two revised sentences in orange, you'll see that they are a lot clearer and a lot more compelling to read. The morning was humid when I got the call that changed my life. Or, on a humid morning, I got the call that changed my life. By eliminating the word it at the beginning of your sentences, you're going to make your ideas a lot more immediate for your readers, which is what you're going for when you are editing your work. The second set of search terms that you should look for as you edit your work include the words there, here, this, and that. These are all words that I like to call pointing words, right? Now, of course, we could talk about them in terms of, oh, well, they are demonstrative pronouns and adverbs. But taken all together, they are words that seek to direct readerly attention, and you can do that with more specific verbs, which we'll talk about in a little while. So if you look through your essay, again, using Control F and sort of clicking through each instance of these words, if any of these words start a sentence, you should rephrase the sentence because you're not off to a very strong or clear start. And you'll see exactly what I mean in the sample that I'll show you in a moment. You should in particular pay attention to the words this and that because they should be followed by a noun, right? Or if we're getting really technical, a subordinate clause. And a subordinate clause is a clause that cannot stand alone as a complete sentence. And you'll see on this slide, I've actually bolded that clause in the sentence that cannot stand alone as a complete sentence. That is a perfect example of a subordinate clause that starts with the word that. All of this is to say, if you spot any of these words, there, here, this, and that within your essay, you want to make sure that they are doing what you need them to be doing and that you're not overusing them. Let's take a look at an example that can be revised productively. So the sample sentence is, there was an acrid smell of burning that I couldn't quite pinpoint. This sentence can be productively revised. An acrid smell of burning permeated the room, and I struggled to pinpoint its source. You can see, as I mentioned earlier, using a strong verb, permeated instead of the word was in this instance, helps not only make my sentence a lot more specific, but it also, I think, makes it a lot more interesting to read, right? Which is, again, one of the goals that you have as somebody editing a paper prior to submission. In an attempt to make your work reader-centered, you want to make it a pleasure to read. The last set of search terms that I want to encourage you to look for in your work are all of the various forms of the word be. Is, was, were, are, be, being, and there's one that's missing here, been. For every instance of you using a form of be in your essay, I want you to try restructuring your sentence so that you're using a better verb. These are fine verbs, and I'm certainly not telling you to eliminate every single instance, right? I'm not putting a moratorium on these verbs in your writing, right? These are important when it comes to identifying and describing different nouns in your writing, right? That's an important aspect of writing, and it's an important aspect of communicating. However, if you are exclusively using forms of be, you are limiting your ability to communicate and you're limiting the relationship that you have with your reader. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. So this is actually one of the earlier examples that I used as a strong revision. Now let's take this revision and revise it even more. The morning was humid when I got the call that changed my life. You can see right there that this whole sentence kind of hinges, that whole first clause hinges on the word was. I can change that. On a humid morning, my life changed with the ring of a telephone, right? We take that initial clause and we demote it to simply being an introductory prepositional phrase. And it just reads a little bit more compellingly. The second one is a bit more if you are looking to write a narrative essay or something that it has a bit more of a creative nonfiction vibe. The morning air dripped with moisture. The phone rang. Little did I know that when I picked it up, my life would change. Right? In that sort of series of sentences, I took one idea and I kind of slowed it down so as to introduce some style and some description. Not all genres of writing are going to require that sort of attention to detail, but it's important to recognize that you do have the opportunity, once you have already communicated the major ideas in your essay, you have an opportunity to make your writing more reader friendly. And that's kind of the whole point of this exercise. When in doubt, use better verbs. Each of these verbs that you see on this slide means something different than the other, right? They all offer incredibly specific action that you can be using in your sentences instead of different forms of the word be. Right? In order, if one thing is emphasizing something, that is much different than something being validated or shown or perpetuated or elicited, right? You can feel free to pause this lecture and keep this slide up as you revise your work. You can feel free to Google, as I did, strong essay verbs, or verbs to use in analytical writing, or verbs to use in literary analysis, or verbs to use in rhetorical analysis. There are tons of great resources out there that remind you what words are available to you. That's not cheating, that's just savvy editing. So I hope this presentation has given you a couple of tips for you to keep in mind as you edit your work prior to submission. If you have any questions, by all means, you know how to get in touch. Thanks.